I'm Peter. Welcome to Tarot with Bonnie and Peter, where we take the mystery out of the tarot and help you bring this ancient practice into everyday life. In this podcast, we'll talk about life, tarot, and everything in between. So grab your tarot deck, get comfortable, and start your journey to tarot with Bonnie and Peter. Hi, I'm Peter. Welcome to Tarot with Bonnie and Peter. Today we're going to talk about the sevens in the tarot. So I'm going to talk a little bit generally about the sevens, and then Bonnie and I are going to go back and forth and talk a little bit about each of the four sevens in turn. Though a couple of things I would say about the sevens, Bonnie, is I think they get a crappy reputation. I think the sevens get a bad go. I think for a lot of people, they rank, just above the fives. And I think that's honestly because of the Seven of Swords, which, can be a pretty challenging card. So if I was going to talk about the sevens as a group, I would say they're cards of like challenge, of change, and sometimes of thinking. Well, you know what? They're change, challenge, and contemplation. How's that to make it easy to remember? 3 C's that, they often represent that. And when it's a challenge, it's a challenge to our status quo, like to where we are right now, because it's pushing us to change. So it might be a change in the path we were looking to go on, or it might be a pause to kind of consider where we're going next. I think of the Seven of Pentacles, for example, and the one thing I will talk about, and we don't always mention these when we're talking about the sevens, is the two kind of sevens in the major arcana might also be important here, because we've got the seven, which is the Chariot, and then we also have the Tower, which is like card 16, which reduces to a 7. So I always think, look, if the sevens are about, what 3 C's did I say? Oh, change, challenge, and contemplation. This is what happens when you make stuff up on the fly, right? Well, actually, I think that I'm going to remember that, because I think that's actually that's a good category for the sevens. And when you think about the influence that those two cards might have, the concept of change, of changing to the status quo, of a challenge to the status quo, is either we move, and that would represent the Chariot. And sometimes the Chariot helps us move forward. And sometimes, because it's, related to the crab, it's linked to Cancer, we don't always move forward. Sometimes it's the perception of forward movement. And the other option is the movement that we get with the Tower, which is basically, let's just blow it all up. Let's just tear it all down. Let's do that sudden strike of lightning, and let's do a complete and utter about face, and do that kind of change of that change of path and change of pace. So, the sevens, though, like we do that pause, or that contemplation, or we do that change faced by that challenge, they are often a catalyst that, or they transform us of some kind. And then the eights, which we'll talk about in another episode, are often the movement. They're the kind of, where are we going? I think of the Eight of Wands, which is just straight movement. I think of the Eight of Cups, where we kind of leave something behind. So, the sevens are about that pause to think, that idea of, after a challenge, and that concept of change. I don't know. I got philosophical there all of a sudden. So,
hey, that's very.
What do you think? What do you think of my philosophy on the sevens?
Well, it aligns very well with actually what a 7 is. If we look at a 7 from a numerological perspective, it's the seeker. It's the person that's looking for the truth. And, if we think about the 6s, we're coming from this number that was associated with like balance, responsibility, care, and nurturing, this sort of outward expression of love and care, for family. But when we move into the 7s, it really is about the inner self. Like, how are we, we're looking for the deeper meaning of who we really
Right.
are. So the sixes are sort of about more community based, and the seven now is about introspection of the self. And with introspection of the self does come challenge, it does come contemplation. So the sevens are tough
Yeah. Yeah.
because it really forces us to explore our inner truth and this seeking of knowledge, this personal knowledge that not everything is as it seems, and we're going beneath that surface with the seven. So definitely philosophical for sure. And people that have a lot of sevens in their numbers and their charts, if they are looking at it numerologically, it is the voice of the seeker, the truth seeker. Those big questions like, why am I here, and what is my purpose, and really digging deep into that. So
Yeah. And I gave the Seven of Swords a bad rap, but I said, oh, I think the Seven of Swords is the reason why nobody likes the sevens, because it is kind of a crappy card. You'd see this guy walking away with all your stuff. But you're right, though, all the sevens do present some kind of an opportunity for us to be able to stop and think and consider what's going on. And they do present the challenge too. So really, you
yeah,
explained that really well, but the sevens from a numerological perspective.
well, you know what? I'm going to tell you now. I was going to wait until we got to the Seven of Swords. That's my stalker card. If
They all
you've
have
been,
one.
yeah, we all have a stalker card. Mine is the Seven of Swords. And again, we'll talk about that when we get to the Seven of Swords. And I do have a lot of sevens in my own chart numerologically. So like the fives, I have fives and I have
And
sevens.
sevens.
It's
Wow.
like, thank you, universe, for giving me these challenging numbers. But that's where we do our
Yeah.
deepest work,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
guess. And
Yeah,
this
you're right.
is really where we can have a lot of awakening, like a lot of spiritual awakening, if you want to call it enlightenment or insight, whatever it is. But that comes in with the seven. So there is a lot of personal development and spiritual development in the seven.
In the
So
sevens. That's interesting. That's really, really interesting. And I always think of the number seven as well. And we won't get sidetracked too much, but is a very mystical number as well. When we think about a lot of ancient mysteries, we talk about the idea
yep.
of the seven visible planets. Um, you know, and of course and then I think of certain myths, like when seven is often a magical number. There were
Hmm.
the seven dwarves. Now we have 7 days of the week, but again, they're based on the seven visible planets. And then there were a bunch of other sevens that now, as soon as I mentioned it, went, straight out of my head. But
Yeah, seven, that lucky number seven.
seven,
Like
right?
so
That's
much is
culturally,
associated with the
yeah.
seven. There's so much intuition in that number seven that we often overlook. We usually see that in other numbers like twos or 11s. But seven is a very highly intuitive number
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
sure.
Now, do we want, because in the past I think we've gone wands, cups, swords, pentacles, correct?
Yep.
All right. You want to take on the seven of wands then?
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
I
Sure. I'll
look, of
start.
all the sevens that are there, I kind of like the sevens of wands, and I'll get into why. I like it when you pass the
When I
baton,
pass the baton,
right? You like that?
no pun intended.
None.
Okay. Yeah. Let's start with the Seven of Wands. I do get this card a lot as well. And I see this card in two different ways. The Seven of Wands for me represents the it represents courage and
Mhm.
resilience and perseverance, but it also represents like what is it that you're standing up for? What is it that you're like fighting for? And I don't like the word fighting because I don't want to bring that negative concept into it, but it's like you're standing up for something and you're defending something. What is it that you're defending? Are you defending something that you believe in? Or are you defending your limitations? Because we can defend our limitations and be like, oh no, I can't do that because of this, and that. You're defending your limitations. So it really gives you the opportunity to be like, what is it that you're really standing up for? Because if you're standing up for something that serves you, then do that. Like if, I'll just use an example of like self-care or like having a yoga practice, for example. It's like, if that's something that you want to do every single day and that's serving you in a way, that's positive, stand up for that and be like, no, I can't do this right now because this is what fills me. Like, I need to do this. And like, nobody bug me. I need to go do my 45 minutes of yoga. But if you're standing up for like, oh no, I don't have time to do this. And I like, it really begs the question of what is it that you're defending and what is it that you're fighting for. So we can see that in a couple of different ways. So when I see that card, for me, again, it's always that like, Bonnie, what are you defending right now? And sometimes we don't always have to be on the defense, right? If we always feel like we're in this like, oh no, I have to defend this, oh no, I have to, like, then it gives us some time to look at that from a different
Mhm.
perspective and to kind of give it some space and be like, do I really need to be on the defense all the time? Might be a little different take on what your
No, no,
version of the Seven of
no,
Wands,
no.
but for me personally, those are some of the things that I contemplate when I see that card.
Yeah.
So, Peter, what
Well,
about you?
no, because you talked. I love that you mentioned the idea of taking a stand. Like it is a card of defense, and I often think because I think of the visual that would be part of the Rider-Waite Smith. I think it's a defense that sometimes causes us. It requires us to have to stand a higher ground of some kind. So, and then I'll get to why I have a bit of an affinity to this card. And for a while, this was my stalker card. Um, it I sometimes think this is a card where we are sometimes faced with a more moral challenge. Like here's that
Mhm,
C word that shows up the either challenge or change or contemplation. Um, that it may be a challenge to our values, a challenge to our morality, a challenge to something that we hold with great passion because of the position that the person is in. I think it might be a challenge to leadership, but
mhm,
whatever you're called to defend or to stand up for, you're called to do it passionately. And as
mhm,
you mentioned, that might be something that is productive and it might actually be something that is not. Regardless, though, you are going to defend it with fire. You're going to defend it with passion. Um, it may be your ideas, it might be your story.
mhm,
This card, from an astrological perspective, has a ton of fire. This is actually Mars and Leo, so fire. Like it there you could almost use this card, and I'll talk about that from a practical perspective. Like you could almost this card would be a good fire talisman. Like if you needed
mhm,
to draw on good solid fire energy to be able to stand up for something, to be able to to put your passions forward. um the other thing though I find with this card is often when it does come up, particularly when I'm doing work with clients, is it does represent an eventual positive outcome to a challenge as well. Because I often reflect on the position that the person is in many of the iterations of this card, that they do kind of elevate themselves above the fray, that whatever the conflict, whatever the energy that's at their feet, that's sort of trying to knock them down, they actually rise above that.
mhm.
So, I often think that when this card does show up, although it does represent a challenge, it often is in the face of a situation where, in the end, the higher truth prevails if you're holding that. The higher purpose prevails if you're also holding that. The higher fire prevails if that's a position you have as well. So,
Mhm. And yeah, I love that, Peter. And the other thing too about this card is almost like the courage to stand up and do what you believe
yeah,
in, right? Like it's important for us to do that, and not everybody has to like it, right? And it's okay to be okay with that.
correct.
So it's like if you're doing something, not needing everybody else's approval for you to be able to do that. So again, having that courage and that resilience to stand up for something that is serving you in that way
Yeah,
and that you are passionate about, and knowing that it's okay to do that. And if people don't like it, well,
too bad. Yeah,
it's their problem,
it's
not yours.
it's so funny because I had mentioned that this card was a stalker card of mine for quite some time, and I would see this card often when I was a school principal, when I was an elementary school
Mhm.
principal, because my take on school leadership was it was my job to be a student's advocate above all else. And I would see this card show up sometimes in situations where my role was to stand up for the student's best interest when no one else would. And
Mhm.
sometimes when you're the only person, especially when you're faced with, a group of people working inside of a building who are, they want something different, and you're speaking to caregivers with the student, and you're, trying to be the only voice inside a building that is presenting, the kind of that's advocating on behalf of the student. This card would show up for me often. It would be
Mhm.
where, I'd be trying to work for what I felt would be a moral strength, a position of moral strength, which to me, advocacy, student advocacy from the place of a school principal is an absolute.
Mhm.
Um, and I would see this card. So, it was my stalker card at that particular point in time. Now it's been a few years since I've done that kind of work, but um, kind of where it's at. So we all have stalker cards, those
We all
cards that
have stalker
show
cards,
up for
but
you every
that
so.
was a very a positive one for you,
Yeah,
so that's good.
yeah, right now it's the Four of Swords that seems to be showing up for me,
Ah,
not
I can help
necessarily
you with
positive.
that.
I know you can. I know you can. I know exactly what that's a call to do, and we'll talk. I am trying to work at quieting, at doing mindful, kind of quiet mind practice. That's kind of like meditation, but yes. So sorry for the tangent as we were talking about cards, but yeah, for me it's the Four of Swords, which we talk about in another episode. If you want to go back
Mhm.
and do some back episodes, we talk about all four fours in an
Mhm.
episode called Exploring the Forest, but that's not what we're doing today. So
Yeah,
we'll look
one
at
of
the
the
seven.
sevens. So, Peter, if you were to purposely use the Seven of Wands for a particular practice, would you have some advice as to what you would use it for?
Yeah, totally. So, and I think I alluded to this already. So, this would become a talisman for me. Like
Oh.
this card is a powerful fire talisman. So, you need to visualize, or even when you have to internalize that extra push, when you got to fight through something that's holding you back, other people, yourself, your own motivation, the circumstance that you happen to be in. I would write down the barrier, that obstacle on a piece of paper, and it might be, I find my hard to motivate myself past this particular point. I'm struggling to work effectively with my team. Whatever it happens to be, write it on a piece of paper, burn the paper, scatter the ashes into the wind, saying something like, obstacle be gone, or what, you can, say something and make it powerful. And I would do that always having the Seven of Wands nearby. So
Mm.
I would use it as a talisman. I would have it there as a visual, but the work that I would do would kind of be associated with the energy of that, I'll call it that Mars and Leo energy, that very fiery astrological energy. I can't think of a card actually that embodies more fire like this in the minor arcana than the Seven of Wands. This is a very active
Mhm.
space to be able to do that. So, what about you?
That's great. I love that. A couple of things, but you sort of touched on writing, so maybe I won't go down that. I would probably normally say like do some journaling about what it is that you're defending and really check in with yourself and be honest about like what are those things that I'm always defending. But I'm going to go a different way. I'm going to say because I do see this card as having the courage to do something that like to do something that you believe in and that you really is meaningful to you. And what type of physical practice can you do that will help you feel more courageous or sort of help you step into that? So maybe because I love yoga, doing some, warrior poses, either, warrior one, warrior two, warrior three, doing some type of pose. It doesn't have to be yoga, it can be whatever you resonate with, but that really invokes this feeling of like power
Hmm.
and not brute force,
No,
but
no.
like standing in your power and really having the courage to stand your ground and to do something that really benefits you and for your highest good. So if there's some type of physical pose
Hmm.
that you can do that really empowers you, I would say pull out your Seven of Wands and really embody that energy in that pose.
Wow. Thank you for that. Do you know what that, when you talk about, because, not a yoga person, it made me think of Ted Lasso, as many things do. Rebecca, one of the characters in the show, she actually has an empowerment stance that she does in front of a mirror where she makes herself very big. She just stretches,
Mhm.
and she's a tall woman to begin with, but she expands her chest, she puts her arms up, and she kind of growls into the mirror. And I thought, well, that would be a really interesting, almost power, and I think she might call it her power pose. So that would be, that made me think of that right away. What a great way to use the power energy, the fire energy, from that Seven of Wands.
It's funny, Peter, I talk about that a lot.
Talk
You're
about what
speaking
the
my language right now because I have this affinity for affirmations and
yeah.
intentions, and I tell people when, I'm coaching them, working with people, doing classes or workshops, I always say when you have your intention, stand in a power pose,
Mhm.
like do it in front of a mirror, right? Like what is that power pose for you? It could be like that Wonder Woman pose where you've got
Right.
your
Oh,
hands on your hips. You could be like crossing that finish line, like, yes, I did it. So many things. So yes, however you feel empowered to do something, you couple that with an intention.
mhm.
Oh my gosh, like the sky's the limit.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Totally. Yeah.
thank
And
you
no, no, no. Thank you.
mentioning that because that you just lit me up. I'm like, you go read that on my website.
That's yeah. Well, go and do that. Are you familiar with the episodes in Ted Lasso where Rebecca does that as well?
I watched the whole series, but how come I can't remember when she's going to meet
Oh,
with
she
her
does it.
like
She does it a few times. She does it a few times. So go. I mean, I think I've watched the entire series 3 times now. It
okay,
was,
yeah.
so I
I've
know
seen
it.
it
I know it
once.
pretty
I
well.
think I may have gone back and started watching it again,
Yeah.
but I haven't watched the whole thing more than
Yeah,
once.
I'm
So,
pretty sure if you or people who are listening or watching, if you go and put, Ted Lasso, Rebecca Power Pose, you'll see a whole series of stuff. But it is a very, even just watching it as you're watching the show, when you're seeing
yeah.
somebody embody and express that level of power, and here again we're talking about the Seven of Wands. So it's giving you that extra charge. It's putting you, in that higher space. Maybe it's
Mhm.
it's that energy that you need to kind of get through the challenge that's presenting itself, whether you're the cause or somebody else is. That power can be powerful.
Yeah, you
The
embody
power can
that
be powerful.
energy. I say this a lot. I'm like, these practices that seem so simple
Mhm.
are so powerful. So, yes, I love that. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you.
Okay, do you want to
Okay.
tackle the Seven of
Yep,
Cups?
I'll start with the Seven of Cups, and you know me, right? I'm always going back to the Rider-Waite Smith, and I think the Seven of Cups is a card. I don't have it nearby, but it's a card where somebody is standing and they're looking at seven clouds, and the clouds, have seven things sticking out of them. And if people read Waite or some of the original writings of it, it's talking about the seven deadly sins or seven temptations. And because of that esoteric nature, I think the card itself sometimes confuses people.
Mhm.
And I always see this card because of the seven offerings that are there. I see it as a card of choice, but it's
Mhm.
specific kinds of choice. It's choice that draw that kind of pull us at the heart. These are cups. This is water. So this is, we're sometimes being driven towards choosing things that we want, even things that we crave, but that we don't necessarily need, because we're being driven by our heart and we're not being driven by logic, like by our head. So with the Seven of Cups, we're kind of faced with the choice that might mean, we got to say a strong yes to one thing and then strong no's to something else. So there's like a commitment, almost a covenant that needs to be made towards one of these cups, which means the other cups have to kind of fall by the wayside. So I always think, again, this, we talk about the idea of choice being one of the things that happens in the sevens. Here we have choice in the Seven of Cups. We have choice that's heart driven. Um, and what we're looking for is a strong yes to one of those cups so that we can give a strong no to the other ones. Sometimes this card also shows up though when we're stuck with an overwhelming option of choices where we're like, oh my goodness, I have to choose this. It's not just a choice between this and this. It's a choice between many things, seven representing many things. Like, oh my God, I got to choose this. And the seven of cups might be there saying, and I actually desire them all. I can't really, at this point in time, I can't discern between what it is I want. I'm emotionally struggling with indecision in this particular point. So, those are themes I think that sit around that seven of cups card. What about you?
Yes. I agree with it all.
Yes, a
The
strong yes. That means, another strong no for some of the other cups. Yeah, exactly. That's what I said.
Exactly, I do agree of all the sevens, this one is the most difficult, I think, when it comes up in a reading, because it does show a lot of choices. And it's when you're working with somebody and these cards of choices keep coming up, it's like, okay, well, there's a decision that has to be made. And then, like, how do you help them make a decision? Well, then we sort of go on from there and look at other cards. So yes, when the seven of cups comes up, and when it comes up for me, I'm like, oh yes, I know I have to make a decision. So what does that mean for me? If it's coming from the cups, it's telling me I really need to hone into my intuition and go into my heart space and see if the decision I'm making is in alignment with what I really want and what is for my highest good. So that could be different things. Sometimes people see this card as illusions, like, oh, you're just picking this thing because it's an illusion. But, sometimes we don't allow ourselves to pick things for the sheer pleasure of picking them. So that could be an indication that there's something in this list that I want to do, and I don't give myself the permission to do that, to enjoy the pleasure of doing that. So it could be a call to be able to do that. It could also be a call to be like, I always make the same decision and I'm in the same place. So this could be, I'm going to make the decision of something that feels a little bit scary instead of picking the safe decision all the time, right? So it's always about coming back and checking in. I always tell people, I'm like, you have to make this decision from like a deeper part of you. It's not a superficial decision that you're making. It really has to align with what is best for you at this time. If it's not an easy decision to make, it's not just like, oh yeah, willy-nilly, I'm going to make it. It's about really finding, like going into the heart. If it's not a hell yeah, it's a hell no, right? So if you look at all of the decisions that you have to make, what is the one that is deeply resonant with you? And that doesn't always mean it's the easiest, but sometimes it could be the sparkly thing that you're after that you never give yourself permission to do. So yeah, that's kind of how I see that card.
Like
It doesn't make it easier to make a decision, but
No.
I do encourage people to go within and see, how does that feel in your heart to make that decision? Does it feel good or does it not feel good? Because your heart usually won't lie to you. So
Yeah, listen, I love that, that everything that's not a yes is no. Reminds me, there's a John Mayer lyric that sounds something like that. And I can't think of the song that it's in, but that's a really, really interesting point, right? It's not a solid yes. Anything that's not a strong yes, really is like yes,
yeah,
but yes,
I
but
came
yes,
across
these are
that a few years. I mean, that's not mine. I've heard that from somewhere, but it's like really making decisions. If it's not like a yes, it's a no. Right. And so many things now, even when I'm buying clothes, right? And sometimes we buy things, we're like, oh, I'll kind of force myself to like it, or I'm just going to take it home and see. And I'm like, Bonnie, you're like, if it's not yes right now, it's not going to be a yes when you bring it home. So I have to remind myself of that. And it really does help you to we don't trust our intuition. So that's your intuition telling you this is probably not a good idea to bring it home. And we're like, oh, I'm just going to ignore that little voice. So I think it kind of helps you form that relationship with your intuition and listen a little bit better. So,
well, yeah, I love that. I love that interpretation. Now, if you were going to do something practical with this card, then what would it be?
what would I do? Okay.
Yeah, what would you do?
I would I would look at each option
Mhm.
and I would visualize like making the decision to pick that option and see how that aligns with your goals and values and how that feels if you were to pick that option and leave all the other ones behind. Because again, when we go within, you close your eyes, you go into your heart space and you're like, okay, I'm going to pick this thing. How does it feel for me to pick that? And then notice how that feels in your body. If it doesn't feel good, go on to the next option. And then you know, you'll probably have a pretty quick decision if you take the time to go through that exercise. Not everybody will, because like, oh, I got to go within and see how that feels, but uh it's a powerful practice. So if
Yeah.
you have a lot of options in front of you, pull out the 7 of cups, close your eyes, envision picking each option and notice how that feels in your body.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. I can, as soon as you said, yeah, the idea of, going deep and going inside. Yeah. I could see myself at sometimes going, yeah, all right, too hard. That's
Too
in the too
hard.
hard basket. I'm out. I'm out. I would do something very, very similar. I think this card lends itself well to a visualization exercise. I'd probably push it a little further even, and I'd visualize even, imagining yourself placing each option inside the cup itself. Or, if you wanted to go so far and you really wanted to deepen this exercise, would be to write options down, contemplate them for a while. Because remember, the nice thing about a cup is that it holds things for a while. So,
Hmm.
you really can pause, put your option inside that cup, think about it, and determine whether or not it's a yes. And as you mentioned, anything that isn't a yes, and I'm going to borrow your language here, is a no. If it's not a strong yes, it's a yo, or it's a no. If it's a not yet, it doesn't mean that's a
Hmm.
bad decision. It just means that I'm not prepared to commit myself to this right now. And then this card, by being able to visualize placing each of those options inside of a cup, or even physically putting, a representation inside of a cup, allows you to pause and really can give all the consideration that's needed. The only thing that I would do differently, because I think this really does push us towards a heart-based decision, because it is the 7 of cups. But there are times when that the cups themselves, that the emotion themselves are overwhelming. So, if we're going to put it in a container, we're going to hold it in a cup. Then let's also try and bring in some of the other elements there. What are the practical what are the practical reasons for making this choice? What might be the rational reasons for making this choice? So kind of bringing in that fire, bringing in that, the water that's already there, bringing in the earth, and bring in the air as well, will be the intellectual reason that I would make that. So, for me, I would do the same thing that you did. I talk about it being a visualization exercise, but I would visualize placing each of the options in the cup so that the cup itself can contain it, can hold it, while I contemplate, while I think about what those options are. And then again, visualize taking the option that I choose and moving it somewhere else, saying, okay, this is the cup that I'm choosing, and I'm putting it, in a place of putting it in a special place of grandeur. I'm putting it up on a mantle, and I'm putting all the other cups in the cupboard. Like whatever works for you from a
Hmm.
visualization perspective, walk through that so that you can really give some thought to the choice that you're making. And what it also does is it takes away that feeling of overwhelming, which sometimes is associated with the choices that we're faced in with this card. So that's
Well,
that.
yeah, if you have
Yeah,
7 options, like
correct.
literally, it's like,
Yeah, and
which, sometimes
yeah,
isn't a bad thing.
it's not.
Having lots of options.
Sometimes lots of options is a good thing, except there are times when we can't manage seven
Hmm.
different pathways. So we have to narrow it down.
Yeah.
That's where it becomes hard. If we've got seven great options, as long as we don't have to choose them, it's like, wow, look at the 7 things I got to do. That's great. When we have to choose them, it's like, oh my goodness. And it might also be that idea of being too much of a good thing. I can't choose because, if I choose this and I don't want to do without that, if I choose that, I don't want to do without this, all of those kinds of things as well. So,
Yep.
okay. We're halfway through.
Yes. Okay. 7 of Swords.
Okay. Oh, is it me?
No, I think it's me. Do
Me.
you do
Okay.
you
It's
want
you. Yeah. You go
you
ahead.
want
Yeah.
me to
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
my stalker?
Your
Ah, my
stalker
seven of
card.
Swords. My stalker. Yes. The Seven of Swords visits me often. I will talk about the Seven of Swords from my perspective and how it affects me personally. Um, I so usually when you read tarot, you certain cards mean like a
Yeah.
certain thing for you, right? So the Seven of Swords for me is the hiding card. So like, what are you hiding from? What are you hiding? Like it's this idea that something is hidden. And a lot of people see this card as like deception or trickery. And again, when I'm looking at this card for myself or for other people, I like to say like there's something that's hidden, and that doesn't mean that you're deceiving somebody, but what it often means is that you're hiding something from yourself, or you're hiding yourself from other people, like you're not allowing something to be seen. And deception can come in many ways. And because this is swords, we're talking communication, we're talking thoughts, our words. How do we speak to each other in manners that are deceptive? So, what are we, it's very easy for us to believe the critic, like the inner critic, right? Like, oh no, you're not smart enough. Oh no, you can't do that. Oh no, um whatever that voice is, we believe that voice so easily, right? That's deception. We don't necessarily believe the positive voice that says, you can do it, go out and, do that thing. That's harder for us to believe. So looking at this card from this idea of deception or hiding, it's like, how am I deceiving myself with those thoughts and those words that I'm telling myself? And then what is it that I'm hiding from? Or what am I hiding from other people? What do I not want other people to see? These could be your talents and gifts, right? We're afraid to put those out there because we're afraid of how they're going to be seen. So it's this sort of illusion of like, I don't want people to see what I have to give, or I don't want people to see what's really going on inside of me, because that stuff's not nice to look at, like, because that's the stuff that I'm believing about myself. So that's sort of one side of the card. And then the other that we often see, especially with the Rider-Waite-Smith depiction, is that somebody is like, doesn't want to be seen, right? They've taken some swords and they can't carry all of them. So there's still some, I think he has like 5 in his hand
Yep.
and there's still 2 on the ground. What is it that you're carrying with you? Again, are these like those deceptive thoughts, those like fears and limitations that you're carrying with you? And what did you leave behind? Like the positive ones? Or it could be now that, we're having some introspection. No, I'm carrying like the things that I want to take with
Mhm.
me, and I'm leaving behind the fears, or the limitations. So again, depending on how we want to look at that card, I really see it as like, what are you hiding from? What are you carrying with you? What are those thoughts that you're telling yourself that, could be deceiving? So this card is really, it shows up a lot for me to really examine those things. And then it's funny, when you spoke earlier about the tower is also my hiding card. So that when I see the tower, I'm like, oh, there's me hiding in my little room. And the tower, that lightning is going to come along and is
Mhm.
going to force me out of my hiding space. So I have to come out into the open. So for me, it's really about being seen, and it's about showing the world, what it is that I have to offer without
Right.
being afraid of whatever it is that's holding me back. So there you have it.
No, that's it. It's really interesting because you talk about the idea of hiding, but in a lot of ways, hiding is deception. Like
Mhm.
it's it's placing something where people, where someone, including ourselves, is not going to see it. It's tucking it away. It's
Mhm.
not putting it in the place that it's supposed to be. So therefore, it is trickery and deception. That's kind of what it is. So,
Right, exactly.
you know,
Not necessarily that you're deceiving somebody on purpose, but you're
right.
deceiving
Yeah. And
yourself.
and that's
Okay.
where because I think again, kind of a multifaceted card. And I would think that deception, and it isn't necessarily malicious deception. That's where I think people sometimes get lost. It
Mhm.
is, as you said, this card can be about deceiving ourselves, which isn't, we don't usually want malice for ourselves, but there are times we can't help it because we believe the narrative, the false narrative, the thoughts that are going through our heads, the swords. This card sometimes shows up, and that is the nature of our deception. The other time that this card shows up, and you had mentioned the idea of the person carrying five swords and leaving two others behind. I sometimes think this card shows up when there is an imbalance of mental capacity or mental resources being used. When someone,
Mhm.
that could be you, someone else, another situation, is using more mental space or mental load than they need. And that's represented by
Mm.
the five swords that are being held. So, but that links to that idea of deception. When we carry too much mental load, we often tell ourselves, it's not, I can do it. I can do it, as opposed to trying to, think about, well, how can I hand some of these swords over to somebody else? How can I
Mm.
lighten my mental load, and share the load? This card often comes up when discussing the ideas of relationships and the imbalance of mental load that might happen, between someone and their significant other, and whatnot. So this is that kind of situation. It's not a deception if we're deceiving anyone. We're deceiving ourselves.
Mm.
It's a card that kind of looks or invites us to perhaps hand some of those swords over. And then the third meaning for this card is sometimes the idea of a necessity to move in a different direction. So to be able to take ourselves in, doing kind of a quick left or a quick right turn,
Mm.
going along a mental path that we had not considered going. And I say that because if you take a look at the Rider-Waite-Smith or even other iterations, the foot or the feet of the person who's carrying the swords are often heading in two different directions. Like, it
Mm.
looks like their foot, I can't remember if it's the left or the right, is about to take a turn down the corner. It looks like they're kind of sneaking, and, they're not necessarily going into a straight line. So, this idea that that we might be in a situation that calls us to head off in a new direction. And it might actually combine some of those ideas. It might be that, we're deceiving ourselves that the pathway that we're taking is the proper pathway. And if we just explored, other options, or if we used our mental faculties a little bit more, if we picked up a couple more of those swords, or if we talked to somebody to get some help, um, we might be able to support ourselves in moving in that different direction. I don't know if I explained that well, but, I always think it's a couple of things. It is definitely the idea of deception. It is also often the idea of carrying too much of a mental load.
Mhm.
And then the third one is often the necessity for a shift, and often a quick shift, and sometimes even a quieter, you talk about secret, hidden shift, or clandestine was the word I was, kind of thinking of, shift in direction. But that's sort of where my interpretation with this card would go, and it would be situation specific. It would often depend on some of the other cards that are showing up as well. So,
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. No, I love that perspective. Yeah, it's perfect. And yeah, sometimes the things that we hide too are the
yeah,
things that we want to do, but we think that we're not capable of
capable of doing.
doing, right?
Yep.
So
Yep.
it doesn't always have to be a bad,
No, no,
but
no,
it
but
it just it
no, go ahead.
makes you look, right? And it
Yeah.
makes you be like, okay, I see where this is going. So
Yeah. Well, and I always think that with this card, it is often a result of, and it might be, I'm not applying enough mental capacity to this particular issue. I'm just sort of floating things by, or, I'm kind of floating by, and someone else is taking the swords and kind of running off with the idea that, might have been
mm,
mine to work with. So that there's that sort of capacity
yes.
there as well. So that concept of either hidden or imbalance, or, whether it's, we can call it deceit or trickery or whatever, we want, but,
Mhm.
it is that concept of, of things perhaps not necessarily going in the direction that they would need to go. Anyways. This is one of those cards where I think you could talk about it for quite some time because there's a lot of meat on the bone with this one here.
Yes, I agree.
Well, you would, especially if it's your stalker card, right? So,
Yes.
I mean,
It's like I see that card and I'm like, oh, not you again. What this time?
yeah.
Okay, how would you use this card intentionally, Peter?
Uh,
Do you have anything?
well, look, I'm going to cop out with this one, and I'm going to say, the pen is mightier than the sword. So I always think swords really are, and as a matter of fact, in some decks, the sword is actually shown as a pen. So
Mhm.
I often think that when a sword shows up, it's always a really good opportunity to do some writing or some journaling. So, I might think about a question or two questions that's related to the situation that I'm in, and then I would write. So, it might be, where do I need to apply some more of my mental faculties? Where do I have to put some additional smarts? What is it that's depleting my mental energy right now? What is it that's causing me to feel like I have an excess of mental load, like I'm carrying too many swords? If it's the idea of direction, what new direction do I need to take? So this would really be, for me, a straight kind of journaling. And I always say the pen is mightier than the sword. Me, I'll often do, a verbal journal. If that's how you want to kind of flesh out your thoughts, then do that. But this would be a really good opportunity for just some straight reflection, reflection questions. And I think the swords lend themselves well to that. And, I kind of
Mhm.
chuckled that the pen is mightier than the sword, that the sword and the pen are kind of the same thing. But we are really talking about a suit that is mental in its nature. It is our thoughts. So thinking about questions is really well suited for the swords. That's kind of a cop out answer, actually, but it's all I got.
I wouldn't say that's a cop out. I think that's really important. So, especially when you're struggling with things, journaling is very, very powerful. In whatever way journaling uh, is right for you, it is a powerful practice and it helps you. Again, to go within, to contemplate, to be like, yeah, okay, it's time for me. When you put something on paper, that's significant, and then you can decide what you want to do with that. You can burn it, you can rip it up, throw it in the garbage. I put mine in water the other day. My kids were like, why are these pieces of paper, like I have a mason jar
Yeah.
with a lid on it and a bunch of pieces of paper on it in my kitchen, and they're like, what is this? Like, oh, just some limiting beliefs that I'm putting in water. And they're like, oh, okay. I think they just kind of ignore half the things that I do. And they're like, I'm just not asking any more questions. So it is very powerful to write things down
Yeah.
and to see how things can transform. So I think that's amazing. What would
I
I
was going
do?
to say, yeah, where are you going with this?
I don't really have a good one for, I agree with you about the journaling. I would say the same thing about like, think about how are you deceiving yourself or other people? Sometimes we do deceive other people. So really check in with yourself. You could, sometimes people see this card as strategy and critical thinking. I have a hard time applying that to this card because I've just never seen it come up in that way, but that is another way of looking at it. So if there's something that you need to be strategic about, or again, I love how you talk about that mental imbalance, have some strategy around something. Maybe bring out the card and then play a game of strategy. So I am not a chess player, but I've never played chess, but that's a game of strategy. So maybe, engaging in something like that, or, even Monopoly can be a game of strategy. Like there's so many different things that you can use strategy for. So maybe trying to make something light out of a situation and using that mental capacity for something that could be enjoyable as opposed to something that really causes you a little bit of discomfort, to get out of that mindset.
You, I mean, and you could push that one a little bit further and remind yourself that the tarot itself is a game, and that there would be strategy games that you could potentially, that because of your facility with a regular deck of playing cards, and then
Hmm.
actually adapt it to use with a tarot deck. Because I mean, I say this time and time and time again to students that so one of the great ways to be able to learn the tarot is to be able to play with the tarot. But if you're
Hmm.
looking for, trying to shift the mind and do something else other than focus on that mental load, that you could actually use. You could shift the meaning in some ways of the Seven of Swords into a much more pleasurable game of strategy.
Hmm.
And you say that strategy games is, a stack of board games behind me covered by, by a sheet.
I
And then
know,
you
I really
you
shouldn't
said
bring.
Monopoly, and I don't know if I visually cringed when you said Monopoly or not. In some circles, Monopoly is a cringeworthy game. I still enjoy it.
It takes
Purists,
too long. I
it does
can't.
take too.
When people say Monopoly, I'm like, I'm out. It just takes too long. People get too competitive.
What
I'm like,
I
I don't care that much.
what I don't
So,
like about Monopoly, because I have so many other options, so many other board games, is the fact that when somebody loses the game, they're out. So what do they
mm,
do? If Monopoly can be a game that lasts 3, 4, 5, 6 hours, what if you're out in 45 minutes?
yeah.
So I much prefer games where the game ends based on, a certain, when you've completed a certain obstacle, then it ends for everybody, or where it just
Hmm.
ends and then people add up their points and kind of win based on that. So sorry, but
No, it's okay. I'm more of
lots.
a card game girl. Like I like card games,
Oh
so
yeah. Huh.
that's like
But
yeah.
that's why I was mentioning the idea of using the tarot as play, because that's where it came from. Like I know we have this big idea that the tarot came from, long lines of esoteric, but it did not. It was a parlor game. It was both a
Hmm.
card game and it was kind of a charade style game. There was a time when they were writing poetry based on the images of the cards that they saw. Like it was play. It
Yep,
was play. All right.
for sure.
How's that for a
Okay.
tangent?
Not just tarot here, folks.
Never
Not
know
just
what you
tarot.
get when you come here. Tarot, it could be games with Bonnie and Peter. Never know. Strategy with Bonnie and Peter.
Exactly,
I don't remember where
exactly.
we are.
We're at Seven of
Seven of
Pentacles, and I
Pentacles.
think you're up.
Oh, okay. The Seven of Pentacles. Okay. Well, so when we think about, because we talk about movement and, we've talked about that idea of change, the pentacles are slow, right? That I think of all the suits in the tarot, that the pentacles are the slowest. And the Seven of Pentacles is slow. It is probably the slowest of the slow suit. That there's no movement there at all. This person is clearly contemplating something. They're sitting there. There's no work that's happening. This is despite the fact that the pentacles are often our place of work. It's where we do things. It's where we do, where we create things with our hands. It's our routine. It's our body. It's often movement. It's our health. It's our workout. It's all of those things. But that's not in the seven. Right? The guy in the seven is just standing there and he's thinking, which is very much a non-pentacle thing to do. But what he's focused on is what he has done. He's got these great questions. It's like, this is the point where, he's like, what have I done? What have I accomplished? Where do I need to go? Even more existential, is that the word? As existential word questions like, was it all worth it? Or is this all there is? Is what I've done, all there is to do? So I always think the major theme with a card like the Seven of Pentacles is this is a card that calls for patience.
Mhm.
That, there is something coming. It's just when we see this card, it's not coming right now. This is a calling to just sit where we are and to be patient with that and to contemplate what we have, to contemplate where we're going, to perhaps ask some of those larger questions, because we're not at the end of our journey yet, right? We're at the seven. We still have 8, 9, and 10. We've got all the court cards to go through. The seven doesn't represent completion. We're not done with anything here. I guess the more negative side of that is it might actually be a card of hesitancy or even a card of a block of productivity or a block of movement or a block of those things that would sit inside the world, the element of earth or the world of pentacles as well. So, this could be kind of a pause of our choosing. So, the Seven of Pentacles is a time where, we're sitting and thinking about what we've done and where we have to go. It could be a pause of somebody else's choosing where there's an obstacle that's preventing us from doing something. And that's also causing us to think about, what we've done, where we need to go. Is this the right thing for me? Even, some pretty deep questions, I think, that come with the Seven of Pentacles. So that's always how I see this card. I really do see it as a very slow card. It permission to be able to pause, permission to be able to pause, and I'm probably, in some ways almost giving away what I would do with this card, but I always think this card rarely sits well by itself, because it's like, well, pause and do what? That's often where other cards really do flavor this card. But to me, it really is a card of stop for a moment, with that perception of almost, yeah. Anyways, I'm repeating myself. So that's what I think of the Seven of Pentacles. What about you?
Yeah, for sure. I agree with that. I see it as the card of patience. So I see it as the card of, you've done a lot of work. We're past the midway point. We're at the 7. We're not at the end yet. And it does give you time to reflect and see what, you've done a lot of work so far. And now you're at the point where you're waiting and you're probably getting impatient. So this is the point where sometimes people just want to give up and they're like, I don't see any progress. I'm just going to walk away. So this card is not telling you to walk away. This card is saying, just be patient. It's just not ready yet. You can't see everything that's going on. So and I think this card is so difficult for people because we live in a society that is like instant gratification. You want something, you can snap your fingers or press a button and it shows up at your doorstep in 2 hours. Like, everything is so fast in this world we live in. It's so fast paced. And this card is saying, it's not ready yet. You're just going to have to wait. So a lot of times this will come up with like people who have made investments. My husband gets this card a lot, and he knows this card. He's like, oh, right, Bonnie, that's like the 7 of Pentacles, right? Where I just have to wait. Like, exactly. It's just not ready yet. It doesn't mean it's not coming. It just means it's not ready yet. And it can also be like, it can give you some time to be like, okay, is there anything I can do in the meantime to tweak something? It's not saying change course. It's not saying give up. It's just saying it's just not ready yet. And you have to be patient and persevere. And reward is coming. You may start to be seeing some signs of the work that you've done. It just hasn't all come yet. So it really is the card of patience and knowing that it's coming. It's just not ready yet. So
yeah, no, I agree. I agree. And it is a hard card. It is a hard card because it really does, in some ways, calls us to do nothing, right? It calls us to kind of sit and,
well, you can
hold,
reflect and be like,
reflect. Yes. Yeah. And that's
But,
what
I mean,
I'd said around contemplation, right? But
yeah, exactly.
that's, you had mentioned that that's uncomfortable. And I think that's uncomfortable because contemplation is not the space of Pentacles either, right? We don't tend to contemplate in the Pentacles. We tend to do. We contemplate in the Cups, where we think about what's it. We contemplate in the Swords. Those are two spots of contemplation. But we're in Wands and we're in Pentacles. We don't contemplate there at all. We do. In one suit we do with passion, and in the other we do with practicality. So when we're asked to stop, that's uncomfortable for us in this space, right? In this
Right.
kind of earthy space.
But it does, if I may, give us an opportunity to practice gratitude, which is part of that suit, right? How we view abundance, right? Abundance doesn't always have to be about seeing what's in front of us, right? Like, how are you creating abundance? How are you being grateful for how far you've come so far? How are you looking back on your journey and being like, wow, I've done a lot of work, like pat myself on the back. I'm going to just take a moment here and reflect or contemplate, right? Like, that's part of the 7. So that 7 sitting in that earth element is kind of like, I've planted those seeds, I've been nurturing them. And now this is the time for me to kind of go within and be like, okay, let's see how things are going and sort of detaching.
Do I sense that there would be a gratitude practice that would come with this card?
No,
Is this
I
what
have
I'm hearing?
something
No?
totally
All right.
different.
Okay.
You want to,
I
you
do.
want to know what it is?
Of course. Yeah, we
Okay.
definitely. Yeah.
So this is for all the bakers and the cooks out there. So I often see the 7 of Pentacles. I use it like a metaphor of like baking something. So it's kind of like you've followed the recipe, you everything is ready, and now it's in the oven, right? And you're like waiting. But you can't open that oven because if you're making a souffle, anybody who knows, if you bake a souffle and you open the oven door before it's ready, it's gonna like flatten. Like you can't do that. So I would say if you're feeling impatient about something, a good way to embody patience is bake something that's going to take a really long time. So not necessarily maybe baking like in like something sweet because usually that doesn't take too long. Unless you're super impatient, then bake something sweet, but like slow roast something like a brisket or like a how come I can't pulled pork, something like that that takes
Eh,
hours in the oven,
slow
right?
cooker, slow
Slow
cooker.
cooker. Do something like that and just notice how it feels to be impatient and want to rush the process. Part of that is like smelling it cooking and being like, oh, it smells so good in here. And you're like anticipating, like, it's going to
Mm.
be done. You're just in that process of waiting. So if you're feeling really impatient about something, pull out your Seven of Pentacles, decide that you're going to cook something or bake something, and notice how it feels when you're getting impatient or fidgety. And then notice how good it feels when you actually get to reap the rewards of eating that because it's coming. It's just not ready yet. So that's
Yeah,
my
now I'm hungry.
uh how to embody the energy of that card. What about you, Peter? What do you
No,
have?
oh no, I've got nothing. Now I'm hungry, actually, after all this
I
discussion.
gotta go bake a brisket or roast a
No,
brisket.
I did. I'll say, I this one, and you can tell as I'm stuttering on my words, I found it difficult with this one, and I think I'd alluded to this one before because I think what I would suggest working with this card would be working with other cards. So I would, if I was working with the tarot and this card came up, this is never the end of anything, that there's always something else that comes with it. So, and I know that this sounds like a cop out because I'm not really providing with a practical aspect of doing anything with this card. What I would say is if this card comes to you, if it's your card of the day, then I would draw another card because I think that
Mm.
there's an unfinished message when we see the seven. The seven might be inviting us to just pause and sit, in our stillness or contemplation. But if you're looking for, a response or an answer or something like that, that's likely going to come with something else. So that was my very, lame ass suggestion was, to work with something else. It's probably because, I'm thinking now about a souffle. Um,
Mm.
or I'm smelling, I actually have a slow cooker meal on. I'm smelling the chicken I've got sitting in the slow cooker right now. So
Mm.
we record this on a
Dinner at
Wednesday.
Peter's,
Yeah. Yeah.
everybody.
I 5 nights a week is I'm on practical dinner duty. Kelly does dinner 2 nights a week. So, because of my continuous home and flexible work nature. So tonight it's very fragrant chicken in
Mm.
the with a little bit of curry. Anyways, so
Oh, okay. Now I'm getting hungry. You need to stop.
well,
You
you
need
did
to
it to me.
stop
You
talking
talked
about
about
food,
baking.
Peter.
You talked about, well, we're in the world of pentacles. You talked about baking. You talked about a souffle. You started it. So that's kind of
Sorry.
where I would go. That would be the only thing I would have to offer. That's all I've got here off the cuff with the Seven of Pentacles. So sorry
No,
if I
that's
let
great
people down
advice.
on that one, but I loved your idea of doing something slow, with baking. But the same thing when people talk about the idea of wanting to exude patience, they talk about the idea of planting as well. So if
That was my other option. Plant
yeah,
something
yeah,
in a pot, like from seeds, and then, practice patience, nurture it, watch it grow. Don't rush it.
yeah. That's one of the things that we do. We do. I think I've talked about this before. We do a ton of gardening here. We have a fair amount of space. We're quite, privileged and fortunate in that way. We've got, a pretty large lot, and we have probably half a dozen gardens, that are spread out throughout the house. But the one that we have in the front, we're really quite meticulous and careful around what we plant because we do, want things to come up at different times. So different
Mhm.
plants and different heights and different colors are highlighted at different times of the season, but that requires patience. It's like you'd love for the garden to look all, lush with all the peonies, right off the bat, but they're not going to.
Mhm.
They're going to, that's going to come out at a particular time. The roses are going to sit and stay for quite some time. The crocuses are all going to come out early and then they're going to go. That idea of planning and being meticulous in your planning, but also recognizing that it causes patience is one of the reasons why things like, gardening or planting is such an important practice to practice patience. So,
Exactly.
all right, there you go. I'll build on yours then. I'll say plant something, plant something. There you go, plant
Learn
something.
something. Yes.
All right.
Okay, Peter, should we pick a card?
Yes, yes. I've got
I think
my
this could have been two episodes, this sevens. This
it
the
is.
challenging sevens really got us talking.
I know they did well, and look, all you have to do if you're listening and you haven't figured out yet that you don't have to listen, at speed. You can listen at 1.25 or 1.5, and it'll go that much quicker. We might sound like munchkins, but all right. Have you got
Okay.
your cards all ready to go?
Yeah, I'll pick a card.
Now, do you know what deck I'm using?
Uh, I think so.
Tarot of the Witch's Garden, which is a
Mm.
deck I've had for less than a week. I blame Sasha Graham. This is the challenge with me is, I'm not going to be able to afford to continue having guests on our podcast because every time we finish recording an episode with a guest, I run out and buy something that they suggested. In this particular case, I went and bought Sasha's deck. So I'm gonna use it today. It's the
Jeez.
first time I've used it. So if you could go first, because I'm going to have to, I'm basically shuffling it from,
Ah, okay.
right.
Wow, you're really, oh, look
Yeah.
at you, Peter.
No, I took it
I
out of the
am
cellophane
impressed.
just before we started the episode, and I'm shuffling it now. So
Okay, so I just had a jumper jump out.
there you
Shocking.
go.
So I'm going to honor this card. I am using a deck. I'm actually quite excited. So it's December now, and I have a deck called the Yuletide Tarot, and it's by Christopher Hughes, and the art is by Aaron O'Leary Brown. I absolutely love this deck. It is very it resonates so beautifully with the season. There are a lot of nods to Christmas, the Christmas tradition in this deck. It's not just a Christmas deck. There's a lot of other different like midwinter celebrations in myths that are included in stories in this deck. So it's so charming and beautiful. I love it. I love my like seasonal deck. So I'm so happy to share this. Okay, so the card that jumped out is and the suits are named a little bit differently in this deck. This is the Nine of Candles, right? Which is the Nine of Wands. So we see somebody who's shopping. They've got lots of bags in their hand, and one bag burst open, and then all the candles have spilled out, and now they're on the road. And this person doesn't. They look tired and they don't look very happy. So very typical of a Nine of Wands energy. So what do I have to say about the Nine of Wands? I'm pretty sure we've talked about it before on our podcast, but when I see this card, I see perseverance, and we did talk a little bit about perseverance today with the Seven of Wands. So again, with that card, it's like actually there's lots of themes of that today. It's like don't give
Mhm.
up. You're at the nine, so you've come a long way in your journey. And if you're feeling tired, you're like you don't want to do this anymore. This guy's Christmas shopping or holiday shopping, and he doesn't want to do it anymore. He's like wants to throw the towel in and go home. It's like you're almost done. You just have a few more gifts left to buy. Don't give up now. So the energy of the Nine of Wands generally is about you're almost there. Don't give up. If there's something that you're wanting to manifest, it's probably just on the verge. And if you give up now, you'll never see it come to fruition. So, although it seems hard, just keep going. You're almost at that finish line, and that really takes courage, especially when you don't feel like you can take that next step. So whatever it is that you're working on or something, know that you're almost at the end and you can do it. So that's my phrase for the day. You
Okay.
can do it. Keep going.
I would agree. I'm going to offer an extension or an alternative interpretation of the Nine of Wands because I sometimes think that the Nine of Wands shows someone who is actually battle weary and
Mm.
at the end of their journey. So if this
Mhm.
guy here, he's got the bag of candles and they've um and they burst, I would actually sometimes say that the nine of wands is saying you're done. Just move
Mm.
the finish line. Pick up the candles,
Uh,
put them in a bag, and call it a day. That you've had enough. You're still standing. Count that as a victory.
okay.
So again, a bit of a different interpretation, and sometimes looking at the idea of the nine being that cycle of completion. The
Hmm.
challenge, of course, with the nine of wands is that it feels like we still have something left to finish. And I sometimes think that so the nine of wands, like many cards, is one of those cards that could have multiple interpretations. So it certainly can be, just just a little bit more. It might feel like you've got nothing left, but you got to just dig into the tank just a little bit further. The finish line is just over there. And then I also think there are times, depending on the circumstance, where the nine of wands is, yeah, you know what? The finish line is over there, but it's okay if you take the finish line and just bring it a little bit closer because you've basically done everything you need to do. And so with this guy, it could be, yeah, look, you just a
Maybe
few
he's
more
done.
things. It's
He's
just you
tapped out.
just got to pick up the gift cards for your kids, and then, whatever you need to get for your neighbor and then go home. The other thing could be, you know what, buddy, you've look at everything you've accomplished. It's not like your hands are empty. Pick up the candles, call it a day. The shops are open again tomorrow. Let's call this a victory. So that would be the alternate approach that I would do.
I like that. And I've never come across that. So thank you for um in like broadening my understanding of that card.
Well,
I
I
appreciate that.
thank you for sharing that deck because what a really I always like those situational decks where
Hmm.
the interpretation of the card is very different, but kind of the same, right? You can see those scenes, and I always think thank goodness for Pamela Coleman Smith who started us off with those scene based pip cards, right? Because they were always illustrated, just didn't have scenes on them, and now we got cards
Hmm.
going everywhere. So
Yeah,
what did you say it
I
was? The Yuletide deck?
Yuletide Tarot.
Yuletide Tarot. Okay. Well, I'm going to
Sorry,
use.
Peter, if you
No, no,
get
no.
this one, you like
I know.
don't blame me. This one is
No,
is
I'm not buying
golden.
this one. I'm not buying it.
Okay.
I'm not doing it. I can't. I can't. There can be
You're
no
tapped out.
more. There can be no more. Since we went to the conference, I think I have bought 7 tarot decks.
Oh, okay.
So we went to that conference, I think, about 4 weeks ago, and I think I've added 7 decks to my collection. And it's not like I didn't have any before.
Right.
So speaking of adding them to my collection, I added Sasha Graham's deck. Now it's with the art by Natasha Ilinchik, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. I know you speak exceptionally highly of this deck. So I don't know if I actually muted my microphone so I could do a couple of bridges while
Mm.
you were talking about the nine of candles because I didn't want you to hear it in there. So I did pull a card. I actually pulled the three of pentacles, and
Mm.
again, so I'm using a deck I'm not familiar with, but it's actually a beautiful card.
Yep.
But like I think about the three of pentacles, another kind of slow card, right? But this is slow for a different reason. We had talked about the seven of pentacles before, and I'm looking at this. This is slow because the person is very meticulously going about their work. And they're not doing it by themselves. They've got an audience there. And in this one, I'm just looking at, they've got like what looks like a little fairy and
Mhm.
what might be a groundhog, or I'd say if it was, Canadian, there'd be like a beaver or a prairie dog, but there's probably a groundhog, sitting there watching. And the groundhog actually has paper. So this is obviously the magic of the forest and the beasts of the forest. So this might be their working team. So they're that would fall into the flavor of the three. So this is a project, that represents collaboration, working together. When we see the three of pentacles, though, sometimes it's work that we're going to put on display, that we're going to show people that our skill is going to be there for them to be able to enjoy, for them to be able to evaluate, even, for them to be able to, I guess, sensate would be the word, to enjoy with their sensations. The other thing I noticed with this card, though, is that there's a light that's shining from above. So there's really, it looks like there's a real warmth.
Mhm.
Um, So yeah, this is often it's a card of work, but it's a card, and again, based on the light that's coming in, it's work that warms us, right? It's to use that light. It's representative of who we are. So we're creating this work so that our work shines out for other people. So I'll just kind of summarize. When I see that Three of Pentacles, I see work that we're going to put on display, that we're going to show the world. It's something that we're creating and that we're going to put out there. It's also work that we're going to put out there for other people. We're in a collaborative project. We're getting together with other people for something that we enjoy, but it's producing something. So this might be a baking circle, to use your previous example. It could create something tangible. It could be a running club because it's about the body. It could be, with a couple of friends and you're going to take a yoga class, but it could also be a project or something that you're working on or creating with a group of people. So that's me and the Three of Pentacles. I do like this. Actually, the iteration of this card too is beautiful.
Mhm.
And I'll probably come up with more and more things the more I look at this card. But that's what I've got with this version of the Tarot of the Witch's Garden and the Three of Pentacles. What about you and the Three of Pentacles?
Yeah, Peter, honestly, it's exactly what you said. For me, when I see that card, it's about collaboration,
Mhm.
community, doing things together as a group rather than just doing something by yourself. It's about creating something that's going to benefit everybody. And it's also too about like everybody having a say. So if you are working with other people and you feel like your voice doesn't matter, your voice does matter just as much as anybody else's. So, it could also be too, if that card comes up for you and you're not part of something, it is an invitation for you to join something. Again, like go to a yoga class, become part of a community, do something that, whatever that is for you, but community is very important for you at this time, and collaborating, working on something together with other people. So not just in isolation. And yeah, it is about something creative that you're doing. So I love the Three of Pentacles. I think it it's a happy card for me. It's like,
Yeah,
oh, good. I get to
yeah,
be with other people.
yeah, yeah. It is. It's
So,
it in most decks too. It's a beautiful card as well. So, yeah, I'm with you. I quite enjoy it.
mhm.
Yeah, thank you for that. Well, we agreed pretty much. Yeah, on that Three of Pentacles. So,
Yeah, that
are we
one's that
are we
one's
done?
pretty. Yeah, we're done. This was a long one. Do you want to tell everybody where people can find you, what you have going on?
Sure. Sure. Well, you can always find me at Peter White Tarot on my socials. So that's mostly on Instagram, but also on Facebook, peterwhitetarot.com, on my website. Right now, I'm actually smack dab in the middle of, but that doesn't mean you can't still sign up, of a course called Planning 2025 with the Tarot. So this is a 3-part course that I hope students will revisit over the course of the year, that takes a look, that we actually go quite deep into the Hermit, which is the card for 2025. We actually examine cards for each of the months of 2025 as well. And then I have a pretty complex spread that students can work with at various points of the year to be able to help them plan their 2025 out. So that's available on my website. It's called Planning 2025 with the Tarot. Yeah, so that's what I've got going on. Go and check that out. What about you?
That sounds awesome, Peter. By the way, what about, yeah, people can find me on my website at breathewithbonnie.com. I'm also at Breathe with Bonnie on Instagram. I don't have any classes right now coming in the new year. That's all in the works, but the other services that I offer on my website. And I'm actually going to be at the Holistic Healing Fair. I think Peter might be making an appearance and coming as well for a little bit. I'll be in Vaughan at the Bellevue Manor on Sunday, December the 8th from 10 to 4. It's free entry. There'll be lots of holistic practitioners, other vendors selling, products, wellness products for mind, body, and soul. So come and say hi. I'll be there. I'll be doing tarot readings and selling eye pillows and card wraps, perfect gifts for Christmas, which is only at this point like 22 days away, or other holiday gifts. But yeah, I'll be there. So if you're in the area and you want to come and say hi to me and possibly Peter, we'll be there in person. So I look forward to seeing you there. And we want to thank you for joining us at Tarot with Bonnie and Peter. We hope you found some insights, and if you ever have any questions or comments, or if you can share, like that really helps us to get the word out. Anything that you want to share with us, we'd be really happy to hear from you. And also, if there's questions that you want us to answer or specific topics that you'd like us to talk about, we welcome and value your feedback. We love to hear from our listeners, and we thank you so much for listening. We do this podcast because we love tarot, and we hope you love it as much as we do. So we thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you next time on Tarot with Bonnie and Peter.